So just to recap real quick, sorry about that, guys. So, when we started off on Tuesday, we were going through the whole bug reporting process, how to go about doing it. We did these two together as an example. And when we did these, we were using these keywords of given and when. And these are keywords that are utilized when creating test cases. Now, there's so many different ways to write bugs, and the ultimate goal is to provide the information in order to reproduce these steps. So I want to go ahead and do another bug report with you guys real briefly, and do it without using these keywords. The idea was, though, so you guys have a format to follow. Otherwise, it can get really hectic and people just are going to write things a million different ways. So at this point, hopefully you all have the understanding of what we're trying to do with a bug report. So let's create one more bug together without using those keywords. And let's see, so I was actually looking through some of the stories or bugs you guys have written. And again, great job on finding some of these. So one of the bugs I saw was when it came to creating an account. So we have two error messages that are shown when you put in a password that's not long enough. And so that would be considered a bug because you should not be showing the same error message twice in the UI. And again, UI, user interface, right? So a good way to go about this would be, who wants to help me out? How would I get started on creating this ticket? What would be a summary for this?
Robert, what's the bug again?
I'm sorry?
What's the bug again?
So the bug in this case is we are creating an account and we put in a password that is too short.
Password issue?
We see two error messages displayed.
Can we just say like a password issue?
That's not clear enough. That's too general, right? A password issue could be many different things. What specifically is the issue?
Short password
providing to
working.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Short password is not working, something like that.
Well, we purposely, so we're showing a validation message because it needs to be a minimum length.
Oh.
So that's not
validation for password is incorrect.
Okay, that's one way. We're much closer now. Anybody have any other ideas?
Duplication of password arrow.
Say that again?
Duplication of password arrow.
Ooh, okay, nice. I like that. So I'm going to rephrase that a bit, but yes, I think that's right there. You're on the money. So the way I would put this as a summary would be duplicate error messages are shown when password is not min length. And let me just put, all right, so duplicate error messages are shown when password is not minimum length. Does that make sense? Right, clear, concise. If you were to just glance over this story and read the summary, it summarizes what the issue is, right? So now we know in the description, this is where we want to go ahead and provide the steps to reproduce the issues, right? So what do you think the first step would be? And this time we're not using those keywords. So we're not using given, we're not using and. Well, and is still acceptable, but we're not going to start off with given. Any ideas?
When creating an account.
Okay, that's one. Anybody?
When the user is on Dean's homepage.
Okay, so we can definitely do that, right? Because I mean, but when you're on the homepage, you have to take another action, right?
It's like we can say
sign up page.
That we can say user is in sign up page.
Yeah. Yes, exactly, right? So we can put User is on, well, in this case, a registration page, right? Oops. And let's go ahead and we want to, again, provide as much detail as possible, right? So what is the registration page exactly?
It's the link, so we can copy and paste the link.
Exactly, right? So we can just provide this link in the issue. So user is on registration page, boom. So we'll be right there at the page. We know what to do. Then what?
Small question, do we need to provide all steps how to log in on this page or just the final address of the page?
So good question, right? So when you write, in this case, a bug, we can, there's so many steps that could potentially be added. And the same, what I'm saying right now applies to even when we start writing test cases, right? There are so many additional steps that can be added that you need to really think about what makes sense. What level of detail should I include? Because I can, of course, go to the extreme of given, or rather, user starts computer, user logs into computer, user opens browser, right?
There's by computer before.
What's that? Oh, by computer before, exactly, right? And if you did that, are you wrong? Technically, no, right? Because you do need to do all those steps. But do we need that for the bug? Is it related to the bug? Does it add value? That's the best question you should ask yourself when you're writing a bug or you're writing a test case. If I provide this piece of information, does it add value to the test case? Does it add clarity? Or does it just add unnecessary text, unnecessary steps? So, your question is spot on. And in this case, sure, we can go ahead and start off on the home page. User's on home page, user clicks registration button, and then continue on from there. But we can kind of abstract this a little bit. We can roll this summary up into this one step. And since we're providing that URL, there's no confusion. There's no way that they should end up somewhere where they shouldn't be. So user is on registration page. Great. We have the URL. What's the next item or next step?
User inputs valid username. Second step, user inputs valid email. Third step, user inputs short, less than how many characters?
8.
8, yeah. Less than 8 characters as a password.
Password, say less than 8 characters. Oops.
You also can add symbols.
Say that one more time.
You also can add user put symbols in username.
I can't hear you too clearly. I'm sorry.
We can add user put symbols in username.
Oh, yeah, definitely, right? User put symbols, but in this case, right, we're just talking about one specific issue, and in this case, it's the duplicate error message for the password. So yeah, we can definitely put symbols and all this stuff in email or username and do all these types of negative test cases, right? But we just want to reproduce, or we want to log the issue that we found, and in this case, it's only going to be the password issue. So we're just going to focus on the password issue in this case. Otherwise, there's going to be too many bugs in one bug, right? Each bug should address only a single item. So user inputs valid username, user inputs valid email, user enters password less than 8 characters. And how do we get the error message to display?
User
Screenshot.
A little ahead, right? Before we even get to the screenshot, how did we get those error messages to appear?
No, user clicks on the register button.
Yes, exactly, right? So user needs to take an action, right? Then user clicks on register button, and then of course we have our expected, and we have our actual.
Robert, I think like the difference between this bug report and the bug report from last session is the word given. Besides, it's everything is the same thing.
Exactly, right? Everything's really the same thing, right? We're not using given, we're not using when, and in this case, we didn't use and, right? And so those are three keywords that are applicable when it comes to Gherkin format or Gherkin style test cases, which we'll be getting more into on this Saturday, right? So when you write those test cases, you will be using that format. When you create bugs, you don't necessarily need to use that format. So I'm just showing you another way to go about writing test cases without using those keywords, because I was concerned that some of you might get a little confused between bugs and test cases. So I want to also show you how to write this test case, or rather write this bug without those keywords in it. But yeah, if we go ahead and go back, or well, we'll finish this and we'll go back to these other ones I wrote. But if you just remove that keyword, the test case still makes complete sense, right? And if you went ahead and were in your first company writing test cases like that, it's completely valid, right? Because ultimately, what's the goal of this bug report? To be able to reproduce it, or allow someone else to reproduce the bug when they go through each step that you provided. And so you'll also see other variations of this, right? You might not see it as consistent as user is on user inputs, right? Because all this can be free form ultimately. But the goal is to provide the reproduction steps. I will, let's see, so what is the name of this format? This format is wait, your mic's sounds like you're. Okay, sorry, I was just reading the comments over here, making sure I didn't miss anything. But the name of this format, this is just a free form format. There's not an actual style or name to this style, right? This is just a free form bug format. And then should we enumerate steps like 1, 2, 3? Yeah, totally. Go ahead.
Robert?
Yes.
Question. Is it has to be that much detailed? I mean, we're sending these to the developers, and they are very technical people. If they read a summary, they already will understand what's the problem is.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of truth to that comment. And with that said, it's not always going to be the developer that gets their eyes on this bug first. Because you can have someone who's less technical that is handling the management of the backlog and is handling the bugs and the work coming, because they have an understanding of the application and the business rules. They don't necessarily have that technical insight. So depending where you're at, you know, you might need to provide this level of detail, or you can go ahead and potentially have a very simple bug and just pretty much have the summary and maybe a screenshot, all right? But we want to do best practices in here. And if you start off by providing the most amount of information, you're going to be on a great start, because you can always pull back a little bit, right? You can always realize that, all right, I know it's going to be these developers, or I know it's this person that doesn't need all of this detail. So you can pull back a little bit if you want at that point. But for the purposes of this course, we want to provide as much detail as possible that makes sense.
But you were saying, like, we don't have much time to test stuff. If we're going to be that much detailed on the small stuff, then we won't be able to test the whole application.
You know, time is a funny thing. In some cases, you might have a lot, and in some cases, you might not have enough. And it's, you know, again, right, everything we're doing is best practices. In some places, you're not going to have enough time to do a formal planning meeting like we did last Saturday, and like we'll continue to do every Saturday. And you won't be able to do retros, right? But you should be doing that if you're following an agile methodology. So time constraints are an issue everywhere. And the personnel in charge, the manager, whomever is able to make the decision will determine if you should have these meetings, or the QA manager is going to determine the type of test cases or how many test cases should be written. So everything's on a case-by-case basis, right? It's best to start off doing everything the right and ideal way. And once you start working at that first company, depending the environment, you'll need to adjust.
Let me add, Robert, here something as well.
Mm-hmm.
For bug reports, you always have time to write the bug reports, detailed and very neat. It's actually not even a question. You have to write detailed, very well detailed bug reports. As Robert just told you, that these bug reports will be reading not only by developers or even not only by product managers, but these bug reports can be escalated all the way up to higher up managers easily. And you don't want to be sounds ignorant in this bug report, right? So let's pretend like you found a really high priority issue, and this will be on the radar of CTO at least, or even could be by CEO even, right? And you want to write it down. It's like your work, right? If you will be throwing just it's not working and that's it, you know, there will be a lot of questions about that. So imagine that this bug report will be who is going to read anybody in the company should read this bug report and understand. That's pretty much the bottom line.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, really quick. For this bug report, I've noticed that the message on the bottom is not the same as the one on top. The one on top in red, it says at least 8 characters. The other one says 6. So I think the one on the bottom is completely wrong. I don't know which one of them is wrong.
Yeah, definitely, right? One of them's wrong. And we don't know what the requirements were because we don't have that information for us, right? But we know something's wrong. This is inconsistent, and there are 2 error messages about the same thing. So in a case like that, you know, you can potentially spend a lot of time trying to find this documentation and speak to the right person, but you don't want to waste time, right? As someone else just mentioned, right? You're going to be in scenarios where there's not a ton of time. So you need to go ahead and be efficient, right? So when we write this bug and we provide the screenshot, we have we're able to address both issues at once. And when we're doing the planning meeting or the grooming session, we can discuss this as a team and get clarity on it. And then just, what was it? Oh yeah, so I went ahead and did the expected result, right? So user clicks register button, validation error messages displayed for password, that's the expected, and actual result, 2 validation error messages are displayed for a password, right? And I can, of course, add a little bit more detail around the specific message that's displayed that was just brought up. But for now, this is fine, right? We have a good summary. We have all the repro steps, expected, actual, and provide a screenshot. Does that look good, guys? Do I have any questions, concerns?
No.
All right, cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and...
I didn't see on the screenshot another window, another message.
You said you did not see the screenshot?
Yeah, you did screenshot, and we see just one validating message, but we didn't see second one.
It's right here. See, we have one here and another here.
I mean, when you click on the register and we see the shown another validation message, but we didn't see in the report in the screenshot those message.
Oh, you're like these steps that I don't have the message in here?
When you put on register, when you see another message appears on the screen. We didn't see on the screenshot.
Yeah, when it's
talking about that's just my extension in my browser. So you can ignore that. That has nothing to do with the application. This is just a password manager tool.
Robert, do we need to always put in something in environment box, like it was tested on, I don't know, Windows Chrome or Mac OS Chrome?
Great question, right? And so I spoke a little bit about this on Tuesday, and when we get a little bit more into our cross-browser testing and our cross-device testing, we'll start to enforce that a bit more. All right. So right now we're all on, we're all on different devices and browsers. You can go ahead and provide the information in your bug report that you tested it on, in this case, say Google Chrome. However, when you provide a statement like that, you need to be explicit and clarify that this issue is only on this browser you tested, or this issue was shown or displayed on this browser, but you did not test anything else. So when we're doing these cross-browser testing, we want to make sure to go through each different browser. So Firefox, IE, the versions of it as well. And so when you're doing that, yeah, you'll definitely want to include that detail. For right now, we don't need to, but as long as you understand that that may be needed, depending the testing you're doing, you're fine. And again, as we move forward, there's going to be a lot more testing that you're doing throughout this course. And you're going to be doing a lot more bug reports as well. And when we start breaking you guys out a little bit more into teams and specific devices, that's where you can start providing those additional details. But for now, we just want to focus on the format. As long as you have that format down, you're good.
But in real world, we do not need, we do need to do that.
Even in real world, it depends the application, right? So some applications are going to say only be supported in one browser. And when you go ahead and write your bugs, it's just understood the browser that everyone's working within. Because we're only supporting, say, Google Chrome, because we know that 90% of our users are using Google Chrome. And that's not going to be the case everywhere, though. And so in the real world scenario, you may need to clarify which browser you're seeing this issue in. You might see issues only in IE, and IE is not a very commonly supported browser anymore. And depending the application, you might have a lot of users that still utilize IE.
So it really depends on test case.
Yeah, it really, and like, that's the beauty about all this. That's what I love about QA, right? There's so many concepts to it, but a lot of it has some flexibility, all right? Some flexibility, but you need to be able to think and understand what applies in your current work situation.
Yeah, thank you.
Robert, I have a question, please.
Yes.
But in real world, if this application is, for all the browsers, not just for Chrome or for Firefox, we have to, as a QA, we have to test it on every possible.
Everyone, yep.
Okay. So we're gonna have it's just we have to do it on each browser. We have to do the same steps. For example, create a username or click on every button. It has to be repeated on every browser, right?
Every browser, yes. It can be very tedious and very boring at times, but that's how come it's important to have analytics. And the company's going to have analytics in place. There are many different browsers out there, and there's thousands of different versions of all of these browsers. You can't possibly go through each one, right? There's not enough time, and you would hate your job if you had to do that, most likely. So they're going to identify what are your main browsers and what to focus on, right? So if we know 80% of our users are on Google Chrome, then a majority of our testing should be around Google Chrome, right? And then the other 20% is, say, on Safari. So we'll focus on those two, but Google Chrome is our main concern.
Quick question.
Yes.
Yeah, so many browsers has like incognito or private mode. So we're gonna test on that mode as well, because basically on these modes, browsers are reacting really different.
Yeah, another great question, right? So it depends on what you need to test, right? So when you go in incognito mode, that removes basically, makes you invisible. It removes all of your history that you have, any cookies, right? Any data that websites stored in your browser, right? Extensions, it turns all that off. And so you can see different behavior in an application when you're doing that. So sometimes you'll need to test in, say, an incognito mode, but that's not going to be the case every time. And that's why it's important to understand what it is you're testing so you can flush out all of these different variations of that scenario.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then I see a question here, how about browser versions? Does it matter? Yes, it does matter, browser versions, all right? We're not too concerned about the accuracy of the browser versions you're testing right now, but in real world scenarios, yes, that does matter, because you can have an issue with, you can have a new release and all of a sudden some of your users are having issues and you're not able to reproduce their issues for some reason. Everything looks fine. You're not seeing these 2 validation messages, for instance, right? And then after more research, you realize they're running an old version of, say, Chrome, right? And so in a case like that, yeah, we might need to test a different version if we know that a lot of our users are on an old version. But this is why analytics are very important. And every website you're on has some sort of analytics. Some data is being captured about at least the type of device you're using and the type of browser that you're using to interact with the web application. Does that all make sense, guys?
Yep.
Cool. All right, great. So I just wanted to show you another way to write the test case without those keywords. So we're going to be automating testing for diff browser. Yes, we're going to touch on automation at the very last week. We're going to show you guys what automation is about and give you the general concept of it, and you'll be able to do some basic automation with the tools that we provide you. But hold off on that. We got a lot more to go through before we even get to it. So to move on, the next item is going to be mind maps. So starting next sprint, you guys are going to learn about test cases, and you guys are going to be introduced to different types of test cases, specifically smoke and regression, all right? Don't want to jump ahead right now because that's coming this Saturday. But just know that when we create this application, we want to test everything, right? And in order to test everything, we need to understand what exists within the application. So coming to this homepage, right, there's so many different things that I can test for. I need to test for this search box, you know, putting in different areas, different countries, different states, different cities, this top destinations, these featured trips, right? And within these, there's more to test as well, because I can go ahead and it looks like I can heart something maybe, or click just one of these tags, possibly from what I see, right? And as we progress further in the application, we see all these different items that need to be tested, right? We have links in here, it looks like. Yep, we have links in here. It takes us to somewhere. There's text, there's a picture. And again, we keep moving down and we see this information right here. We have another link, we have the footer, and all this is just the homepage, right? And we go down a little bit. We already saw our sign up page. We have that, we have a login page. We have a create trip page. There's so many different pages within this application. And this application is, I'm gonna say, one of the simpler applications you may come across. So how do you know what needs to be tested? Of course, you could be lucky enough to be a part of the early on development process and be there from the ground up and have all of those details, but things still change over time. And it's hard to keep track of all those details. Pictures are very helpful. If we can have a way to visualize the application, it will give us a better understanding of what we need to focus on or What are areas of the application that might be overlooked? What are areas of the application that are repetitive, right? And so if we had a way to visually break down this application to allow us to reference it when we start the test case creation process, it's going to simplify our life a lot. So one tool I'm going to introduce to you guys today is called a mind map. And so, let's see. And so a mind map allows us to create a visual of the application. And this is going to be our starting point, right? And so we just have this white canvas, right? And just think it's exactly that, a canvas, and it's for us to start doing all of our artwork on, so to speak. And we know that the starting point of Deans is what? Where do we start in the application?
Requirements.
Well, so forget the requirements part. When we're talking about just the application itself, right? When you go to Deans.com.
Login.
Sign in.
Homepage.
Homepage.
Exactly, right? Homepage. And so knowing that this Deans is our project that we're working on, when we go to the page or when we go to the application, it's going to take us directly to the homepage at first. Now, as I just mentioned and started showing you guys, there's so many different things on the homepage, right? And so how can I go ahead and start breaking this up a bit more? So what I can do here is, just want to make sure that I create the right branches. Oops. Cool. All right. So here I started like branching things out, right? We have the home page, and now all these branches are being introduced. And so the nice thing about this is we could move some of this around a little bit to help with the visual of it. And so let's go back to the home page real quick, right? So this program is called Coggle, and I'm going to share it in just well, it'll be in our Confluence page, but Coggle IT, and I'll just put it in our channel right here. So if you guys want to start checking it out. And so let's go back to the home page now. And what do you think, just looking at this, right, what's going to be the first thing that you have in mind to test? Or rather, wait, before you guys even answer that, we want to go ahead and break this out into small chunks. The whole idea of Agile is to be able to do work quickly and ensure that we can continuously deliver these changes, features, and functionalities to our end users, right? And so when we did our sprint planning, right, remember the whole Fibonacci sequence, the story points that we were estimating? We want, if anything was too big of a story, as I mentioned, right, we would break it out into smaller stories in a real world scenario. We want to make sure everything is small and consumable. And the same thing applies when it comes to testing. And so when you look at this page, if you start thinking of it as sections or containers, now you're starting to break up this big home page into specific little consumable pieces. And so looking at this right now, this initial section right here, this initial container that we see, this can be one section itself, because we have an action or a link that can be taken in here, and we have this search box. And the search box is going to take us to somewhere else in the application, and this is something that needs to be tested for. Decomposition, yes, beautiful, thank you. So that concept is what we are applying right now when it comes to this mind map. And so with that said, right, going back to this, this mind map over here, we can go ahead and call this, let's see, what would be a good name for this? So we have our where do you want to go section. And so this where do you want to go section can contain just this search bar right now. We have an image over here, but none of this is clickable. So we can go ahead and call this the, as I say, the where do you want to go section, sorry. And so let's go ahead and we have a home page right here, and I'm going to, so I got all this stuff, clean this up. All right, so we have this where do you want to go section. And then within this section, we have the search bar, right? And let's do this. Where do you want to go section? And in this case, we just have this one item search bar. So looking at this, I can homepage, we're drilling down. Within the homepage, we have this where do you want to go section, and we have a search bar. What else do we have here? We have top destinations, right? And what do we have within these top destinations?
Thumbnails, we call them thumbnails, right?
Thumbnails are good, yeah, thumbnails. They're also like can be referred to as cards.
Yeah.
Exactly, cards, right? So we have this top destination section, and we have a couple of cards that need to be tested as well. So we're here in the home page, drilling down a little bit, and we have top destinations section. And don't worry, please guys mute yourself. If not, I'm just gonna mute you just to prevent any noise. And then so we have this top destination section. And then within the top destination sections, we have these cards or these travel cards. And then let's see, we can go ahead and break this out a little bit more if we wanted to say specifically 4 cards, but that might not be the case on a smaller device. And I will, all right, let's just see. So don't, all right. So I just want to verify how this is gonna look on a smaller device. So in this case, right, on a smaller device, we don't see those cards. But since we're just focusing on a desktop or a desktop browser, we're gonna move forward with the expectation that we're gonna have this top destinations card visible, and there may be 1 or more cards displayed. Then we scroll down a bit more and we have featured trips, right? And in here we have these different items and we have this little clicker over here, right? So we have a slideshow of destinations or a slideshow of featured trips. So let's go back here. Oops. Let's call this our featured trips section. And then within here, we have the, what is it? What did I say? We have these slide show, really carousel, there we go. Travel card carousel. All right, might be misspelled, but whatever. So then we have this travel card carousel that needs to be tested for. Let's see, and then we go back there real quick. What else do we have here? So then, okay, perfect, right? So then within this travel cart, within featured trips, we have this favorite icon that we can test as well, right? We need to make sure this is working. Travel cart carousel. And then we have, actually, no, I don't want to do that. Forget that. Travel cart carousel. Where'd my page just go? I think I lost it. So all right, we have the travel card carousel, and we're just keeping this high level right now, right? So I caught myself going a little too deep into it right now, because I was going to start talking about this heart icon so you can favorite things, maybe these tags over here as well, right? I can even go ahead and start talking about this. But the purpose of this mind map is to keep things high level right now. So we have, what else do we have? We have this featured trip creator from our community. So let's just do community featured trip section. And then, let's see, do we have anything in here? Right, and then within this featured trip section or community featured trip section, we have the same thing then. We have the same type of carousel. I know I'm spelling that wrong, but that is fine. Community featured trip section. Now we have this. And then so, let me make this, make this. And so all of this so far is just related to the homepage. So we see that it's giving us this visual representation of what exists on the homepage. What do we need to keep in mind when we start creating test cases around this? And so when you look at this, you know, all right, I have this what do you want to go section, or where do you want to go section, this top destination sections, this featured trip sections, this community featured trip section, and these are the main items within that need to be tested, right? Now there's more testing or test cases that are going to be developed around this, but this is starting to give us that decomposition of the web application that we're working on. And all this is just on the homepage so far. So
what about header and footer?
Yes, sir. Right. So I was just going to get to that one. Thank you. Header and footer, is it only on the homepage?
No.
No, right? It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right. So if we go around a little bit, log in, right, we have this header and footer. However, ooh, look at that. Now we have the search trips in the header. So we do have a small variation, it already looks like. Let's do this. Go here. Some cookies, right? So I'm just clicking around right now, seeing if this header and footer is the same throughout the whole application.
Robert, there is no header in the section Our Blog.
In the blog?
Yes, yes. You need, yes.
Okay, right. So good catch. So these are things that we want to keep in mind, right? So what I want to show you right now is, you know, in every application, a header and footer is going to be carried throughout the entirety of the application. Now, it might vary slightly depending how the application is designed. In this case, we see that this header includes the search bar if you're not on the home page. So we actually need two variations of this header within our mind map. And it seems that these preferences, or rather the footer, remains consistent throughout the application. So if we go back here, let's create one, and we're going to call this, oops, and we're going to call this common items. And within these common items, as was already mentioned, right, we have the header and we have a footer, right? And we know, though, that the home page has its own version of a footer, right, which does not include the search bar. So what I would do in this scenario is create two different headers. We have a header in common items, and this would be without search bar. And then we have another header in the home page. Header, oh, I did it the opposite way, sorry. Without search bar. And then this should be with search bar. And so now we've broken this out a little bit. So again, right, so now we have this visual. It's starting to come along a little bit. Hopefully it's starting to kind of look a little clearer and starting to make a little bit of sense. So let's see, the header is changing, depends, are you logged in as a customer or just a visitor? Great, that's another great observation, right? And these are all things we need to keep in mind when testing, all right? When you start testing a specifically, a specific feature of just, rather really any feature of the application, you need to ask yourself, how does this piece of the application behave depending the state of the user? Is this a logged in user? Is this a registered user? Is this an admin type user? Is this some other special type of user? Because some applications can have a bunch of different user types, right? You can be in an approved status. You can be in a pending approval status. And all these different statuses or scenarios can cause the application to behave differently, or something different should be shown to you. Something can change in the workflow. So as you start writing this out, right, and you start developing this mind map, that's what you need to ask yourself. So possibly when we're logged in, we might not, let's see, the header changes. So yeah, in this case, it just looks like the header is going to change depending if you're a visitor or customer, but there might be other options displayed to a logged in user. So, you know, when you're doing your testing, you need to explore all of those different variations. So let's keep breaking this out a little bit more. So we have our common items here. We realize that one of the common items is not exactly common on, or rather it is common on the home page, but it's a little different on the home page, right? We have without search bar, we have with search bar, and the footer seems to be consistent throughout the entire application so far. It might change as we keep drilling down into this. So let's move past the home page. We know, I hope you guys know, let's just go back to the home page, that there's another section. Actually, let's just finish it up. There's only this one other section really. So we've broken out all these sections, and what are we missing? We need to add this section as well. So what would this section be? Travel, create a trip, publish. Let's see. So I'm going to talk about this in just 1 second. So you see me using this tool right now, right? We're going to talk about this in great detail as we progress through the class. But one thing that's useful for it early on, without you understanding anything about code, without you being a developer, without having to get into the nitty-gritty, the real technical stuff of all this, if you go ahead and right-click and click inspect, it's going to open these developer tools. Or if you have a keyboard and you have F12, you can click F12 as well, and this is going to open up for you. If you're unsure about the name of something, or you're unsure what items are related, if you click this little select an element in the page to inspect it icon right here, right, we start getting all this visual feedback of the page. So we can start seeing a shared section, right? This is one shared section. We go up a little bit, we can see that, let's see. We can see these cards are obviously all going to be its own section. We have this as its own section, right? So it just helps give you again, that visualization of what's related and what's not related. And so it just takes a little playing around with. You just got to move the mouse slowly. But it's just a good way to get that visual again, right? And again, in this case, I wasn't sure exactly what to call this. And it looks like this is referred to as this join community content. And so with that, we can go ahead and break out this last section or add it to the home page. And join community section. And what do we have in there? We have a button, right? We have this create a trip and start earning button. So this breaks out our homepage fairly well. Very high level though, right? We don't want to get too into it right now. We just want that high level visual. That's what we're focusing on. And again, we have these common items right here. So let's jump to another page right now. So we know we have home page. What other page is going to exist? We have the, let's go to our, what's this? Let's do, sure, let's do the sign up page, right? Or rather, let's do a login page. So we have this login page. Now we have this, so login page. And there we go. Sorry, just trying to move this around a little bit so it looks a little cleaner. It's a little tricky to play with sometimes, but it's very useful. So we have our home page. We have our common items over here. Now we have our login page. And what do we have within our login page? We have this login section, right? And so here we can go ahead and put login section. Now I can go ahead and if I wanted to, I can break it down a bit more, right? And have the specific email address field and password field and login field and even these links right here. But again, right, the purpose of this is to keep this high level, right? So when you come back to this and you start reading it, you're like, all right, login page, we have a login section. Now let me go here and see what that's about. And then when you start creating those test cases, right, it's just a roadmap for you. It's something to reference. So you know where to go in the application and you know all the different things that you need to keep in mind for when you're doing those test cases. So, right, login page in this case is going to be real simple, real lightweight. And we have this what? Sign up page. All right, and let me move this. So now we have a sign up page over here. And what do we have within the sign up page? We have create an account section. Don't worry, guys. You guys will have access to this. So I will put this out there shortly, but as a quick workaround, yeah, I'll just post a picture, but it will be available to you guys. So then we have the sign up page and we have this create an account section, right? And hopefully you guys are picking up on what I'm doing right now, right? Again, we're just breaking this out, giving us this roadmap so we can have that visualization. And I'll just do a trip here. Now we're gonna have this search trip page. And let's see, I'm not sure of an area that has trips. Does anybody know of a city that has trips already planned?
How about earn money page?
Earn money pages. So before I jump there, right, but just to touch on this, right, we have the search trip page. And we know that there's probably going to be a list of trips that are going to be visible right here. And we're going to go ahead and break this whole thing out, right? So we have this search trip page, and then we're going to have this top section of basically filters, right? Because these are all filters. And then we're going to have this list section that needs to be broken out. Now we have this map section, right? So the same way we did the home page, we're going to do the same thing for this search trip page. Let's see, it'll be pretty clear.
Try San Francisco.
Yeah, I did. I didn't get anything. Right, so maybe we need to get we need to figure out the right city to see some results, or you can go ahead and create a trip, right? You can create test data within this, right? It's a test website that we're working on, and we can create test data for our test purposes. So yeah, we would break this down, as I mentioned, just like the home page, earn money page, same thing, right? So what do we have here? We have these different sections, right? So we have this invite friends section. We have, so log into invite friends. So log in to invite friends. I'm gonna assume that it's gonna show us different text when we are logged in, right? So we're gonna have two versions of this, right? Again, logged in and not logged in. But we can go ahead and break it down to these three different sections. So we have, get $30 for every trip section. We have earn $20 by referring traveler section. Earn $5 when you refer a friend who creates a trip section. And so again, right, same thing that we did with the home page, we're gonna do the same thing to all of these pages. So we have that whole visual of the application. Does that make sense? Do I have any questions around that?
Robert, can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Do we need to use exactly this application to create this tree, or we can use Excel sheet? I mean, why exactly this application we need to use to create the tree?
So,
my map.
So you can pretty much use whatever, all right, so every company can do things differently. And this is not the only tool that's out there. There are many different tools that can be used to create a mind map. To use Excel, I think that would be difficult. However, I've seen people do Photoshop within PowerPoint or Microsoft Word, right? So if you can get it done and it makes sense, great. But is it going to be maintainable in the long run, right? Is everybody going to be using that Excel spreadsheet? So, to answer your question, could you use Excel? Yes. For the purposes of this course, we're going to be using Coggle.
Okay.
And then we are, let's see, I had one thing I was going to say. I'll try to remember that. Any other questions?
Can we create a place like field, I mean, like a trip which is not on the map?
Oh, okay, so just a branch off on its own? You could, if it makes sense, right? And so even the way I did this right now, so for some of you guys, you might think of doing it another way because it might make sense to you, make more sense to you doing it that way. You might want to change the layout. You might want to just have one mind map for each page, right? And so it can be done like that. And again, that's the beauty of all this, right? There's so much variation, and whatever makes sense, not just for you, but the organization, your future company, right? That's what you should do. So, and again, right, we're going to be using Kaggle for our course. And you guys will be able to break this out further, and it's going to be what you reference when you start doing the regression suites, right? And you guys probably don't know what that is yet, and that's fine, right? We're going to go into that on Saturday. So don't jump ahead. Just know, though, there's a purpose behind this. We're doing this so we can reference it as we move forward into the next sprint. Now, one thing I want to say is this is just one tool of many tools. So in every company won't necessarily be developing a mind map, but we believe that having this decomposition of the application we're working on is going to help you all have a better understanding of how to view a web application and how to start identifying things to test and components that are shared across the application, right? So there's a lot of value to this. However, this is not, again, the only tool, and the purpose of this is for regression, right? So we don't want to highlight that we've developed mind maps and we're experts with mind maps, because that's not really it, all right? But we are experts when it comes to writing regression suites, regression test cases, because we understand how to break things down. And using this tool specifically, Kaggle Mind Map, we were able to break it down, which assisted us in developing our test cases that we will be getting into on Saturday. Anything else, guys?
Yes, Robert, do we have to consider maybe in the future different user roles within this structure, within this mind map?
Definitely. Yep. As we saw, there's going to be some slightly different behavior for a logged in user versus a non-logged in user. So you could potentially have, just say, this mind map, which would be a non-logged in user. And then you can have a variation of this for just a logged in user. So you can see what's different without mixing it up too much.
So we will need to create a few structures, or?
So you're going to be working with your team. You're going to be working with your team on this a bit more. And you guys are going to work together on this to figure out what's the best way, what makes sense for you all to break this down and build upon it further. So if you guys decide you want, multiple mind maps, right, for a logged in user versus a non-logged in user, that's fine. That's cool. Just remember, right, we want to make sure all the work that we put into it is reusable. In this case, this is only going to exist for the duration of this course. However, real world scenario, all that time and effort you're putting into developing something like this, you want to make sure it can easily be updated in the future, easily be easily maintained. So, keep that in mind when you make these decisions on how you want to create this. What's our homework for Saturday? We'll tell you on Saturday when we do our planning lesson and we go through all the stories, just like we did on last Saturday. All right, guys, let's see. So there are some links that are being shared right now. So good stuff. Thank you.
Robert, I want to give us some update.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so on Saturday, there will be another teacher who will be, so Robert will be not on this Saturday, but this Saturday will be another teacher where I will introduce you on Saturday. She has amazing experience and she already helped you out a little bit. You probably saw her. Her name is Tatiana. And yeah, so you will see her on Saturday. That's pretty much it. Along with Dennis.
Let's see. It is not, Kaggle is not defined as a test case management tool. This does not have any of our test cases in it. It's just something that helps us write our test cases when we start that next week. I am not going to Hawaii, no, I wish. I will still be around, so you guys might see me again, but yeah, it's been fun, and again, you'll probably see me again, but that's all I have for you today. I believe that's all Evgeny has for you right now as well. Just for a quick workaround, I'm just going to go ahead and take a screenshot of this and put it in our channel so you guys can reference it. I will be sharing the link to this within our sessions page in Confluence. And again, the homework is the sprint work, right? So if you haven't finished it, keep working on it. You need to finish all those stories. That's your homework for the whole week. And thank you. I really appreciate that, everybody. And hopefully, yeah, I mean, just continue on and do great things and enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you all soon. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.
It was really enjoyable.
Thank
you.
I'm
Yes, we agree.
Bye-bye.
Thank
See
you,
you soon.
Robert.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.